Greetings, everyone, on this first Sunday of getting together in January. Please join me in our call to worship. We gather this morning to find joy and comfort in one another, come, let us worship together.
Good morning, Birmingham Unitarian Church. It's good to be here today and to welcome the new year with you. Whether you're joining us here in the sanctuary or remotely via Zoom or watching this recording later, it is good to connect with you. As a multi-platform church, it is important for us to build a bridge between online and in-person participants. We are calling this connection opportunity Greeting Our Virtual Neighbors. First, we will project the image of folks who are currently up on Zoom, up here on the screen, and ask them to turn their cameras on and give us a wave. Now, we who are gathered in person will turn to face the camera in the back of the sanctuary and give them a wave. Whenever and however we connect with BUC, we are building BUC. At home, on campus, in the world, every day we are Birmingham Unitarian Church, and we are building the beloved community. For our first hymn this morning, please rise as you are willing and able in body and spirit, and embody this song with us. Sorry, it was different on the order of service. We'll come back to that in just a second.
We join with other Unitarian Universalists around the world as we light our chalice. Look at the flame. It is the spark of light that warms us all as we gather in community. It is the spark of light that opens our minds and hearts to all that we can be together.
And now, if you would rise in body and spirit and join in our first hymn this morning, Enter, Rejoice, and Come In.
Join in.
Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Open your hearts, everyone. Open your hearts, everyone. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Don't be afraid of some change. Don't be afraid of some change. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in.
On this first Sunday of our gatherings in January, we are reminded of the gatherings that we have had in the last couple of weeks, where we may have met with family and friends, and some of them are gone now, but we are still here in our community and we gather. And this month, the theme for our congregational work is the theme of community. How appropriate for January to be reminded of community. And we have 3 weeks, or 4 weeks really, to work with this theme. And today specifically, we are looking at one of the things that forms a glue that binds us together in community. And that glue is altruism. The characteristic of altruism, big word. It's also called empathy, another big word, but we also know it as big-heartedness. So big-heartedness is the theme for today, and we are going to look at it in a variety of ways, reflections, poetry, and a lot of inspirational work by Shannon. So let us begin looking at this theme.
I'm in the right place with the right notes. That's good. Mr. Rogers often talked about the many ways to say I love you. He even wrote a song about it. Now, I'm not going to sing it, but I'm sure when I say there are many ways to say I love you, there are many ways to say I care about you, many of you can hear Mr. Rogers' soft, kind rendition of the song. Now, on one episode of his program, he highlighted one of his special ways to say this by holding up a sign with 143 on it as he sang. Why 143? Because it represents the number of letters in I love you. Fred Rogers considered the word love to be an action verb. Beyond something we say, it is all that we do to care about one another, to meet each person where they are, or as he would say, I love you just the way you are. And being kind is an important way to show this, to honor each other's humanity. Mr. Rogers was a native Pennsylvanian, and he lived and worked there most of his life. Pennsylvania returned that love in 2019 when Governor Tom Wolf declared that May 23rd would be celebrated as 143 Day, a day of kindness in Mr. Rogers' honor. Now, this was not a passive honor. Governor Wolf strongly encouraged people to embrace the spirit of the person he called the kindest Pennsylvanian and do something kind for your neighbors. The state's website urged residents to perform simple acts of kindness, such as giving someone your seat on the bus, taping coins to a parking meter, or complimenting a stranger. 143 Day has been a success and will be celebrated for the 4th time this coming May. Now, Mr. Rogers had a way of defining success and said that there are 3 ways to ultimate success. The first, to be kind. The second, to be kind. And the third, to be kind. After reading many articles by and about Fred Rogers, I have learned that the things he highlighted and valued the most were not transactional, which means he didn't really expect something back if he was kind. Things like this had to be freely given, and love, kindness, and helpfulness were hallmarks of his big-heartedness. As Mr. Rogers said, imagine what our real neighbors would be like if each of us offered, as a matter of course, just one kind word to another person.
Many poets have written about what it takes to be big-hearted or altruistic, kind, and neighborly. One poem that I looked at is titled Altruism. It was written in the year 2002 by Molly Peacock, who is a contemporary American author and poet, originally from Buffalo, New York. I'm not going to read the whole poem to you today, but please look it up by Googling her name and the title. And of course, if you have her book, you can just look in there. She explains in her poem that our selfish heart, right in here, can be like the heat that surrounds a hot barbecue in the backyard. You just stay around it and you tend to that. To get to the neighbor's yard, we must go through that heat, make it beyond that, through that heat that surrounds our own selfish heart. And she writes that altruism is, and this is a quote, it's not giving, but coming to know someone is there through that wavy vision of the self's heat, so that love becomes a decision.
The mission of Birmingham Unitarian Church is to be a free and welcoming religious community that encourages lives of integrity, learning, service, and joy. One way we live out this mission is by giving half of our weekly offering to a nonprofit organization that shares our values and addresses needs in one of these areas: environmental action, economic justice, civic engagement, and racial justice. We support a new organization each month. The recipient this month is the Wisdom Institute, a grassroots African-American womanhood and girlhood nonprofit based in Detroit. It supports gender equity, inclusivity, healing justice, and accountability in life and leadership so that all girls and women know power. One of its recent projects is supporting and encouraging voters in northern Detroit to to exercise their right to vote. Let there be an offering in support of our beloved community and organizations that build the world we dream about. This morning's offering will now be received with gratitude. Ushers, please come forward. We are a church of open minds, loving hearts, and helping hands. With gratitude, we dedicate this offering to the good works of our congregation and dedicate ourselves to its service.
Let us now join in a time of reflection, prayer, and meditation. We begin with our joys and sorrows. Our congregation shares a joy with Kelly Taylor, who says, "I would like to wish my sweet Madeline a happy 21st birthday." And our congregation shares a joy with Valerie Phillips, who writes, "Happy 18th birthday to Taylor Phillips." Now, amongst life's joys, we also share in sorrows. We have both a sorrow and a joy that is shared with David Greer. The joy that Channel 56 is repeating USA and the Holocaust. The sorrow that it shows the widespread fascism and anti-Jewish actions in the 1930s. And the joy that it shows a picture of Reverend Sharp and mentions the Unitarian Universalist Committee actions to rescue Jews. Sorry. Our congregation also shares a concern from Larry Friedman. Yvonne Verscheuren is recuperating from serious complications resulting from an abdominal procedure and hopes to be discharged from the hospital this weekend. Our congregation also shares a sorrow with Julia Craig, who announces that Joanne Humphrey has peacefully passed away on December the 30th at her daughter Julia's home. Her last days were spent surrounded by her 6 children. Her husband, Jim Humphrey, was visiting his son in California, and he suffered a fall, and after a few days in the hospital, has now returned to his son's home. There will be a memorial service in memory of Joanne Humphrey on January the 28th. That's a Saturday in the BU church, and it will also be on Zoom. Spirit of life and love, mystery of many names or no name at all. Be with us in these colder days of midwinter. May we find ways to connect to one another with empathy, with altruism, loving hearts, and spirituality. In this new year, may we be compelled to commit random acts of kindness. And may we find ways of being compassionate and big-hearted towards others, so that they may see fulfillment in their lives. Others who are our close loved ones, and also others who are farther away, farther in geographical space, and others yet in more distant social, political, or religious space. And may our spirits remain warm, notwithstanding the cold days. For this we pray. Amen, shalom, and blessed be. Let us now join together in the meditation on breathing.
When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love.
There's a big question related to today's theme of big-heartedness, and that is, can one learn to be altruistic or big-hearted? Scientists have an answer, and it's also something that appears in scripture across religions. And it is, of course, hopefully, part of what children and adults learn in the home, in schools, and by interacting with one another. Scientists remind us that the capacity for basic morality, specifically altruism, became part of human nature tens of thousands of years ago. To be specific, they say 70,000 years ago. Of course, we know both history and daily life provide many examples of the lack of altruism. While we do have a natural capacity for big-heartedness, many other things play a role in how we behave. Our upbringing, our circumstances, and our education in relation to moral values and ethics. Looking at some examples of scripture, in Mahayana Buddhism, for example, the compassionate human, who is called a bodhisattva, makes a vow that they will save all those who are suffering, which is everybody, really, and that they will not accept salvation for themselves until every other living being is saved. And in the Bible, we see condemnation of greed in verses that form an arc from the Hebrew scriptures to the New Testament. Specifically, in the book of Isaiah, we read in chapter 5, verse 8, "Ah, you who join house to house, who add field to field, until there is room for no one but you, and you are left to live alone in the midst of the land." To me, today, that sounds a lot like the description of the winner of the game of Monopoly. More about that later. And in the New Testament, we read about the wonderful example set by the Good Samaritan, who reached out to save someone that others had passed by without helping. The major point of the story is that the rescued man was a Jew. The ones who had passed him by were also Jews. And the Samaritans were the enemies of the Jews, and yet here is the Good Samaritan. And most of us have heard the parable of the rich young man in the Gospels. It's in 3 of the Gospels. But less well known is the story of Ananias and Sapphira, which is in the book of Acts, chapter 5. People in the community were told by the apostle Peter that they had to sell their property and lay all the money from the sale at the feet of the apostle so that it could then be distributed to the needy. But Ananias kept some of the money for himself. Why not, you might think. But when the apostle found out and communicated with God, God meted out a very severe punishment. And if you've read that story, you know what that was. I'm not going to tell you the details here. But the same was done to Sapphira when she came home. The people who saw this happen were very afraid. And no one else would have dared to withhold any of their money. They gave it all to the apostle. Okay, when I read that, I was shocked by that cruel punishment, especially because the rich young man, he just got to walk away and think about it. He had a second chance, or many second chances. So I thought this was very unfair. But more than that, for today, I wondered, you can force someone to give away all their money by scaring them into it. Like if a robber demands all your money at gunpoint, I would give it. You know, I'd go look in all the nooks and crannies and say, here you go. But does that make you really more big-hearted? I'm asking you. I don't see any people who agree that that would make us big-hearted. But there are other ways to learn and practice big-heartedness, and it's good to start doing this since childhood. In Germany, for example, there are elementary schools where children who finish their assignment do not get a gold star or anything like that. Rather, they get the honor of helping other kids who might be struggling to finish their assignment. Now that is altruism at work. And in some countries, like Japan, young school children alternate tasks of doing things like scrubbing the floors of the classroom, serving meals in the cafeteria. It's not that they don't have personnel to do that, but it's a way for the children to learn to do their part for others. Do you think that's a good way of becoming altruistic? Yeah, that's much better. And then, very recently, last year, I think it was, there was that Spanish runner in a competition who saw that the Kenyan runner who was in front of him had become disoriented. He thought he was at the finish line, so he stopped. But the Spanish runner tried to explain to him, he didn't know the language, but then he just pushed him along so that the Kenyan indeed did win the race. When he was asked by reporters why he was being so generous, he answered that he would not be able to look his mother in the eye if he had just run on and won the race for himself. And you know, in some cultures, altruism is indeed expected of every person. In Africa, there is the culture of Ubuntu. It's also known by other names, but the word basically translates as humanity. Humanity. It's a collection of moral values and principles that make people into the authentic human beings that they really are inside, so they can fulfill that capacity that they have naturally. And the motto of Ubuntu is, I am because you are. Let's do that together. I am because you are. Family game time is a great opportunity for learning and practicing altruism. But so many of the games we play are competitive and are played with a die that sort of makes some people lucky and others not. Take Monopoly, for example. I never really liked that game. You win through a combination of ruthless business-like strategizing, charging exorbitant rents, taking advantage of those who are already hurting, and putting people in jail who haven't really committed any crimes. The winner is the person who has most of the property and a pile of money. And the prophet Isaiah had foreseen it all thousands of years ago. Luckily, we can play that game as its inventor had intended. That is Elizabeth Phillips. And it was really stolen from her by John Darrow, who made millions selling it to Parker Brothers. Not a very altruistic person in that sense. Maybe in other ways he was. But Elizabeth had designed two versions of the game. The one that we buy from Parker Brothers and the one that she preferred, which was one where the community works together to gather wealth. And everyone does well. So what rules could we use to make the Monopoly game community-oriented, cooperative, fun? There is a Monopoly game on one of the tables in the holders room, and you can practice making rules that would make it more fun. But we're about to get it inspired with many other ideas. So hold on.
For the choir anthem this morning, it's called A New Year Carol by British composer Benjamin Britten. And it originated in Wales. It's also known as Levy Dew. This carol was traditionally sung at New Year and is associated with New Year customs. The song celebrates the New Year as a combination of folk songs and religious ideas. Here we bring new water from the well so clear for to worship God with this happy New Year. This verse tells us of a Welsh custom where children would collect water from a well to sprinkle on the faces of passers-by. While singing the carol, they would also beg for food or money. Washing everything at the end of the old year was a tradition, and still might be a tradition many people take part in, and they would purify the house and welcome in the new year. In the chorus, sing Levy Dew, the water and the wine, the 7 bright gold wires, and the bugles that do shine. Levy is an Old English word for lady, and Levy Dew comes from the French lever à Dieu, raise to God. The chorus is about Holy Communion in the religious sense, the water and the wine. The 7 bright gold wires and the bugles that do shine refer to the golden strings of the harp and the trumpets of heaven. Sing Reign of Fair Maid, which is the 2nd and 3rd verses, thinks of the fair maid as a depiction of the new year. So it bids adieu to the old year and says, welcome in from the east, the new year. Here's the Busey Choir.
How would you describe a random act of big-heartedness. Take a minute to think about what a random act of big-heartedness might be. Have any thoughts? What could a random act of big-heartedness be? Raise your hand.
I was thinking about just giving away a $10 bill to somebody.
Yes, definitely. What? Oh, yeah.
Well, it could be paying for someone's food in line, in driving through a food order. This never happens to me, but my wife all the time.
Giving an extra big tip to someone in the service industry. I love doing it.
This is something that happens to me personally. My son lives with me most of the year, and he always takes the garbage out. And so he's gone now, and all of a sudden, my neighbor across the street has taken to coming and taking my garbage down to the road. And I think that's just wonderful.
Absolutely. Any other ideas, thoughts? Yeah.
I took a Christmas card and knocked on the door and greeted nicely my neighbor who's been rude to me for 2 or 3 years.
You have a very big heart. Well, let's talk about what a random act of kindness is. So, a random act of kindness generally has 4 parts. So first off, you're doing something nice that goes above and beyond a common courtesy, right? Like holding a door open or complimenting someone's outfit. Those are nice things that you should do anyway. But going above and beyond also doesn't necessarily mean like a big, extravagant gesture. It just means that you're doing something beyond a reason. You might do something nice for somebody. For a random act of kindness, you're surprising someone when they least expect it. So it's not necessarily done as an expression of gratitude for something that someone else has done for you. And afterward, you should feel good about doing this nice thing and not necessarily expect anything in return. So I asked you to describe big-heartedness, a random act of big-heartedness, and I think we're kind of on the right track here. So let's talk a little bit more about some different examples of altruism and big-heartedness that we've seen in kind of recent history. But first, we need to take a trip back in time to April of 2020, at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic and the initial lockdown here in the United States. Everyone had to adjust very quickly to a remote environment, including news agencies who were responsible for keeping everyone up to date on what was happening in the world. Steve Hartman of CBS News created a series of videos called Kindness 101. In one episode called Altruism, he shares 4 stories that demonstrate the power of putting other people's happiness above one's own. In one story, a young boy named Miles finds $20 in the parking lot of a Cracker Barrel in Ohio. While deciding to do with the money, he saw a soldier sitting at a table in the restaurant, which reminded him of his father who had passed away on active duty while in Iraq. He writes a note explaining that his family likes to pay things forward and thanks the man for his service. The soldier was also inspired to pay it forward and has since passed along the $20 that was given to him. And the note that he received is a constant reminder for him to continue extending love and kindness to others. In another story, Steve shares about Eugene, who goes on a literal journey to help a complete stranger walk again. Eugene learned about Arthur and his story in a video that came across his Facebook feed. Arthur was the victim of a mugging. He was shot and paralyzed. Eugene was immediately taken with Arthur's story and vowed to find a way to purchase an exoskeleton device that would allow Arthur to walk. Eugene quit his job and hiked from the California-Mexico border all the way to Canada, asking for people to donate to his cause on social media to help fund this device for Arthur. Towards the end of his trek, around mid-Washington state, he learned that he had reached his fundraising goal. Shortly after, Eugene saw Arthur as he turned around the corner and came down the hallway towards him, using the new device to walk. Steve also shares about a neighborhood in Massachusetts whose residents all learned sign language so that they could communicate with 2-year-old Samantha, who was deaf. And they did this simply because they wanted to. And in another town in Massachusetts, a community of people came together and brought the party to the yard of 3-year-old Quinn, who cannot leave his house due to a weakened immune system following treatment for brain cancer. Each of these stories highlights aspects of random acts of kindness, the ones that we talked about a little bit ago, and just how big-hearted we could be when we decide to do something for someone else. Doing something nice that went above and beyond. Eugene certainly went above and beyond to help Arthur walk again. However, an act of big-heartedness does not have to be as big as something like that. Remember, above and beyond just means that it's more than a simple courtesy. If we're surprising someone when they least expect it. Since Quinn wasn't able to go out into his community, they all came to him instead and surprised him every day with something new. Feeling good about doing this nice thing, Samantha's neighbors are able to communicate with her as she grows up in their community, and now they are also able to communicate with others who use ASL, and not expecting anything in return. Miles decided to give the money he found simply because he thought he should pay it forward instead of keep it. So having heard about all these different stories and examples of altruism and big-heartedness from across the nation or the world, can you think of any acts of kindness or even big-heartedness in our BUC community? Would anyone like to share if they have any thoughts?
I unfortunately lost my aunt just before Thanksgiving, and right before Christmas, we got a knock on the door, and my husband had no idea who it was or why they were handing him a poinsettia, but it was from UC for me. And it really touched me, so thank you.
Any other examples? Well, I can think of one. Oh, wait, sorry. Just kidding. We'll hear from Kate first.
This is an act of kindness that the BUC choir gave to me. Well, members of the choir. I was in the hospital. I was over at Woodward Hills, recovering from surgery. And the quartet came to my room and sang to me. And I swear that was the most wonderful thing that ever happened. They have no idea how wonderful that was. And then the choir came and rehearsed in the nursing home and brought me to church in a wheelchair so that I could sing for the spring concert. That's an act of kindness.
Any others? Okay, so my example, I'm sure you've all heard of. So when I joined BUC as the Director of Religious Education in July, all everyone was talking about was these flamingos. And that's all they're still talking about. You can't scroll too far on the BUC Community Facebook page without coming across a picture or a comment about flamingos. So, in case you're like me and you had no idea what was going on, let me give you a summary. Although it started off as a fundraiser for BUC, I still kind of see it as a collective act of big-heartedness, a facilitated altruism. It had all the characteristics of a random act of kindness that we explained earlier, but with some layers and a little extra help to make it all happen. So for $40, you could send a flamboyance, which is the collective noun for a group of flamingos. You could send a flamboyance to the yard of someone else for a day. Or you could purchase flamingo insurance for $100 to prevent a flamingo flamboyance from appearing in your yard. Nevertheless, the flamingos were so popular that they could only make so many appearances, and that in order to share the love, they had to go virtual. So you could also send a flamboyance of flamingos to someone's inbox as an email. And for the sake of doing it and making it all come together to spread joy and happiness, you could be a shepherd and transport the flock of flamingos all across Metro Detroit. So for 3 weeks, people were sending flocks of flamingos to brighten someone else's day, serving as stewards of the BUC beloved community. From the dispatchers to the messengers, everyone played a part in surprising someone else with a flamboyance. Whether you were doing it to support BUC or to surprise someone else, or maybe both, it was certainly above and beyond a normal courtesy. And don't worry, the flamingos have all found loving homes after their great migration. As members of the BUC community, we are no strangers to kindness. Many of us take the opportunity to do something nice that ultimately helps other people by pledging to support BUC on a yearly basis or by participating in a BUC fundraiser. Many more support BUC and the surrounding community with the weekly offering. But if you're looking to stretch those kindness muscles and that big heart of yours even more into the altruism zone, think about what you can do for your own act of random act of big-heartedness and how good it feels to give love.
Thanks, Shannon, for those awesome reminders. Well, let's go ahead and sing about this and take this newfound idea into the world as we close with our last hymn for today. Please rise in body and spirit. Come and go with me.
Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound, where I'm bound. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to
we are in this mood of big-heartedness, let's play some big-hearted games. There are some non-competitive games on the tables in the coffee room, and actually they make it possible for us to practice our big-heartedness by following their rules, but there's also a Monopoly game, and you could share ideas about how this game could be played in a cooperative way so that it becomes co-opoly instead of monopoly. And those joining us on Zoom can also talk with one another or think about ways in which the rules can be changed to make it cooperative and gentle. What would you do with the jail, for example? Is it just gonna be skip one spot, or can you do something more creative? I'm curious to find out. So let us make it so. You may join in reading the words of the benediction. Go now into this world as a beacon of hope and joy. Go in love, go in peace. Now that our worship has ended, our service begins. May it be so. Amen, and blessed be.